Hello, web design students. Welcome to week 13, CSS Frameworks Part 2. So let's continue with Bootstrap. Let's talk about content. Now that we talked about layout last week, now comes more pieces to build a website. You can find components on the left on the main Bootstrap page. So examples of useful components for your Bootstrap website include carousels for displaying a series of images, collapse, you can use these to make accordions or similar content holders. So you can use collapse to use a button to show or hide content. So in this example, you can click on a button here and then stuff will pop out underneath, like here. You can make drop downs. So you click this and then a drop down will toggle down here with menus underneath. You can use Bootstrap for that. You can make a split button where you click just part of it and then the drop down shows up underneath that part here. You can make all kinds of forms with many options using Bootstrap. A Jumbotron is a simple hero unit for calling extra attention to featured content or information. Often there's a hero image behind this. You can make easily nice lists with Bootstrap. You can make navigation with Bootstrap. Here's a simple version. There's lots of options for this, and I'll show you this in the Bootstrap website. You can make a nav bar with extra subcomponents like a drop down and a search bar. They can give you this code all at once. I'll show you that in a second too. Popovers, these are little windows that pop over when you click on a button. Scroll Spy is a fancy one that spies or tracks where on the page you are and highlights the link that's associated with that section. Tooltips are similar popovers, but they show up on mouse over instead. So instead of clicking, you just mouse over these and show a tooltip. Let's get here in the Bootstrap website. So under documentation, down to components. So I showed you carousels. Here is an example of a carousel. You can click through. You can click through this version that has a little indicator bar underneath. It shows you which slide you're on. Here's the collapse that I showed you. So if you click on one of these, something shows up here. Here's an accordion style. And all the code that you need is right here. There's drop downs. Click on the drop down button and you have more things to click on here. Here with actual clickable stuff. And then you can use their styling to make these kinds of buttons. You can do a split button like I showed you earlier. So it only shows up underneath this drop down arrow. You got a lot of different kinds of forms. So here's some form stuff. You don't have to write forms from scratch. You can just copy their code. Usually there's a copy button here. And there's all sorts of things you can add to it, depending on your information that you need. Different kinds of styling. So as you can see on the right here, there's all the different types of form options that you can select from. So I'll skip that for now and move on to the next. Here's a Jumbotron. These are usually at the top of a website. In our example, I'll actually put it at the bottom of the website, but Here's where you can grab people's attention with big text and a button, usually some kind of call to action here. And here's the text, here's the code for it. You make nice lists using unordered list group, and list group item classes. Styled it up nicely. Here are all your choices and options for your lists. So this is all nice. Here's some simple navigation. Here's the code that goes for this. You can center them using this justify content center class. You can justify content n, put them all on the right. You can stack them. You can make navigation through tabs using the nav tabs class here. You can do what's called pills, nav pills. You can fill them out a little more. Remember, this all works on Flexbox, so there's nice spacing here. Tabs with drop downs. Pills with drop downs. So that's nice. Here's a nav bar, a more fleshed out version of a navigation. There's all sorts of stuff here. You can put a logo here. Here's a drop down. Here's a search bar already made for you using this code out here. Add your brand to it here. Add your logo, like I showed you before, I said before. Here is a nav with some responsive in it. So once you get to a certain size, now you have the hamburger menu, so that's nice. Again, here's a nav bar with a search form in it. So lots of options for that. I showed you popovers. Click, and then you have this extra stuff show up here. Different options for where you put the popover. Here's scroll spy. So right now, this paragraph is highlighted because we're at this location. But if I scroll down some more, then the next one gets highlighted because it's active, and then a little more. And the next one gets highlighted. Even combine it with a drop down so you can really see where you are. So that's kind of nice. Here's tooltips. So tooltips show up on mouse over. Nice little additions. And there's a lot more I didn't talk about, but they're all in here. Feel free to go through those and look. Now let's talk about utilities. So far, we've discussed the starter template and layout last week, and we just talked about components. You can find utilities underneath components in the left menu on Bootstrap's website. So what are they and why do we use them? Well, we add classes for HTML using to get pre-written styles. And so we've talked about content, we talked about structure, and now we can use these utilities to get better styling of our stuff. These are features we would normally add manually, but with Bootstrap, you can use their pre-written features. Like borders, we can use border utilities to quickly style the border and the border radius of an element. So these are great for images or buttons or any other element, really. We can use embeds and get better control of our iframes. We can add shadows or remove them to elements. And we've got a lot of ways to style our text and control how it looks. Here's justified text. We can do vertical alignments based on the baseline. We can add margin and padding, which has become very important for our example website. So you can specify margin and padding using Bootstrap classes. One for property, size, and size added together. So let's take property. The property is either margin or padding. And then the second part is the sides. So you got top, bottom, left, and right. That's self-explanatory. And then X and Y, X is for left and right together, and Y is for top and bottom together. We're going to leave it blank and then have a margin and padding on all sides. And then the final number is the size. For 0, that eliminates the margin and padding. And then you have margin 1 through 5. 5 is the most. It relies on something called a spacer, which is part of Sass, which is an advanced system for making presets in your CSS. We won't get into Sass in this semester, but that exists. It's built, Bootstrap is built using Sass, and so they've got some Sass spacers in here. Just know that it goes from 0 to 5, and then 5 is the most for their presets, and then it's the most margin or padding you can add. You can add more, but not through their system of margin and padding here. So we'll do some examples of this in the example website coming up. Like I said, you can have borders for your divs using utilities. So using the border class, you can add a border or border with a direction to add borders to your stuff. So this result for border, you add borders on all 4 sides. Border top just adds a border to the top of this here box. You can also subtract borders. So border 0 gets rid of the border on all sides, and then you can specify which sides get their border removed here using a direction and 0. Here are the results of border 0 and border top 0. No border here, no border all around. You can add colors from Bootstrap standard themes. I'll show you those in a second, but you can add borders and then a border color. Here's the result. Here is a primary color blue, and then secondary is gray, and then success is green. You can add rounded corners to your elements to round off the edges. So here's 7 examples: rounded on the top, rounded just to the right, rounded on the bottom, rounded to the left, rounded circle, and then rounded 0. With these classes, you can get these results. Here's the rounded circle. Here's no border or no roundings. You can do an embed in conjunction with iframe or the embed tag itself, or straight video. You start with class embed responsive on the div that the iframe is in. So you have a div and then you put the iframe inside of it, and you add aspect ratios to it too. So this is a nice way to control your iframes and not have them all over the place. And this styles the iframe for you as long as you close the iframe inside of a separate div. So that's what I showed you here. Here's a div, and then here's an iframe inside of it, and then styled up nicely. Shadows, you can easily add or delete box shadows plus some other attributes. So shadows are disabled by default, so you add them in using shadow, and then some other stuff here: padding, margin, color or background of it, and then whether you round them or not. So that you can all put that in here and then get these results. So again, it says no shadow. Here's a small one. Here's a regular one. Here's a really large one. Here are the 4 ways they got them. Text, there's lots of options for controlling how text looks. Here's some justified text with text justify. You can align them using text left, center, or right. So we're going to use this coming up. Text left, text center, text right. Your text can be specific to the viewport size. So you can left align on viewport size small or wider, or medium or wider, or large or wider, or extra large or wider. So depending on your viewport, you can set the alignment of the text with these classes. You can also do text transforms. So you can make your text all lowercase or uppercase, or capitalize the first letter using capitalized text. So here are those classes. You go from this to this. Here's something to note. Text capitalize only does the first letter. So here it's already capitalized, written in. This one's not written as capitalized text. So when you do text capitalize, it'll bump this up to an uppercase, like this. You do font weights. So font weight bold, font weight normal, font weight light, font italic gives you these results. There are other things you can do with text, like wrap them, monospace them. You can even do word breaks using text break. So let's go back to content for a moment. We can make responsive images in Bootstrap. To make an image responsive, we can add the class img fluid to the img tag in our HTML. You can see it in action on the Bootstrap site. I'll show you that in a moment. And for more on img fluid, you can check it out in the images section of the Bootstrap site on the left. And one more thing. Also on the left, you can have some typography controls here. So you can do small and faded using text muted over here in this example. You can do big display text for you need headings that are really big, not like the usual 1 through 6 that are really for the meatier content. We'll use this in our example site. Here are the classes for the big display headings. They go from 1 to 4 for these results. Okay. And there are plenty of options for lists and block quotes. I'll show you those on the Bootstrap website. For your final project, you'll need to have the starter template, which will include doc type and the meta tag for responsiveness. Either you download their CSS files or you link to them. The starter template automatically links to them. So if you want to download it to your local, that's fine too. You just have to make sure you link to it properly. For your layout, you must use class container or container fluid and class row and some kind of column class that we talked about last week. For your content, you should have at least 2 fluid images, so .img fluid. And then you must use at least 5 components and or utilities. So in our example website coming up, we'll see about using different components and utilities. So here are those utilities in the Bootstrap website. So borders, here add borders, you can subtract borders. Here are the different colors. Here's a radius. They have a rounded pill one too, I didn't include. So those are borders you can add. Let's go to colors. I didn't show you this yet, but here is their preset colors. So if you like these colors, you can use those. Primary, secondary, success, danger, warning, and info. This one's a teal color. And then light and dark, white, and transparent. So these are the default colors. Embeds, so you can include YouTube videos and such. If you wrap your iframe in an embed responsive, and then you can add a aspect ratio. So here are the aspect ratios. Here are those shadows. Add shadow and then a little extra stuff here, depending. You can do sizing to make elements as wide and tall as they need to be. You can also do it relative to the viewport, which we did, which we'll do in the example. Here's spacing. Here's the margin and padding that we just talked about. And we'll do this in the example as well. We'll use these. All sorts of text styling. So left, center, and right alignments. You can wrap and overflow your text certain ways. You can do a word break. Here's a text transform that I showed you in the presentation. Font weight, italics, these are all here. You can do monospace. You can also do baseline adjustments here using a line. So those are some of the utilities you can use. There's more here, of course, but those are the ones I showed you right away. So let's do some.